Welcome to the Artist Work Ethic Podcast. I'm Mike Pelak. I'm a screenwriter, actor, and filmmaker who's always looking to maximize my time and potential as I work to break in. In this podcast, I talk to artists of all kinds who have seen success in their fields about their process, habits, and work ethic. Today on the show is Lee Eelus. Lee is a UK-based artist. In London in the early 2000s, Lee discovered the world of street art. He started experimenting with stencil-based works and went by the name Eelus. Banksy saw Lee's work around the East End before inviting him to release his first screenprint edition through the renowned print studio, Pictures on Walls. The picture of a young girl walking a Star Wars AT-AT sold out quickly, establishing Eelus as a favorite amongst collectors. The image has since become iconic and is considered a defining piece of the emerging art movement. I also recently launched my Substack. I'll be putting out some writing through Substack each week, and that's also how you can stay up to date on this podcast, as well as other projects I'm involved in. I hope you'll subscribe to read along at mikepelak.substack.com. That's mikepelak.substack.com. A couple quick things before we jump into the episode. I've talked in the past about myself working on breaking into screenwriting. Please check out blackoilfilms.com/screenwriting. There you can check out some of the screenplays I've written. I have the first 10 pages of each one uploaded, but feel free to email me at theartistsworkethicpodcast@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to send you a full script if you're interested in reading. Last thing before we get into the episode, I would love anyone listening to subscribe, rate, and review the Artist's Work Ethic Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps us put the show out there for more people to listen to. All right, Lee, thank you for coming on with me today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Mike.
So when you first made your leap into art on like a professional basis, how confident were you in yourself, and did you have any kind of backup plan?
I would say, well, let's think so I first started making art as a kid, but when I first started making art properly, it was probably about 2002. And I was probably about as confident then as I am now. It's that kind of constant imposter syndrome. I'm not classically trained. I didn't go to art college. So everything that I do is through a process of, making as many mistakes as possible and watching as many YouTube videos as possible. I mean, back then, early 2000s, YouTube wasn't really a thing. So it was reaching out to various other artists or buying the books that were out at the time and just trying to soak up as much knowledge as I could. It wasn't really a confidence thing. I'm not a very confident person as such, but it was just a kind of a need to. I was a graphic designer at the time, working in online media, web design, and I just really needed an extra avenue for creativity, so I was drawing a lot after work in sketchbooks and that kind of thing, which is something that I've always done anyway. I just moved to London, and it was the very kind of early days of the street art scene. There was kind of the very first Banksys were starting to pop up and that kind of thing. And I started off as a fan, and I would go around the streets of London taking photographs and documenting everything. But then it just got to the point where I was like, well, hang on, maybe I can have a go at this, So that, like we chatted a second ago, the DIY punk kind of aesthetic, it was like, well, I don't know much about how to make art. I haven't made art since I was at school, but I can certainly give this a go. So I kind of went and bought some paint and some basic materials and just started to teach myself the method, reading lots of books, really, because I have ADHD. So I like kind of using the hyper focus, which we have. It kind of really came in useful then. So really, really studying mainly people like Banksy and Logan Hicks, Chris Stain, various stencil artists, and just trying to see exactly how they were doing things. And just copying as many people as I could.
Do you think that mindset of, I'm not going to worry about going to school for this, I'm going to just figure it out on my own and get the materials and just start making it happen, where do you think that mindset came from for you?
Um, I think it was just pure necessity. I was so unfulfilled creatively. But I mean, as a kid growing up, I loved drawing and I loved writing stories. And so all through my childhood, I would make up these stories, write the stories, and then I would illustrate, like I would draw like a, imagine that the book was getting published, and I would draw my own book cover and I would draw the illustrations for the inside of the book. And that kind of thing of just like, well, just having a go at anything. I've always kind of had that. And again, looking back now, I think that with the ADHD thing, I think it's very, your kind of interests can be scattered all over the place. And when you get into something, you really get into it. And your interests are very wide ranging, but can also be very deep as well.
I mean, it almost sounds like you've always had some kind of a vision for where you were going once you honed in on a particular
Definitely.
discipline, we'll call it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, when I started to get into street art, and I started to paint both on and off the streets. I mean, I was painting stencils around East London, but I also had fairly shortly after that, I was like, well, maybe I can kind of monetize this in some way. And I opened up a little kind of market stall stroke shop in Camden Market in London. So all the stuff I was producing, all the stencils I was producing, a lot of them for the street, I just started to spray them on cheap bags and canvases and paper and just started to sell them as well. And then I went to one of the main kind of publishing houses in London, Pictures on Walls, who was kind of part owned by Banksy, and they used to put on these big events where they would sell their screen prints editions. It was called Santa's Ghetto. So like every year, it was like a kind of quite a dark Christmas themed kind of fun exhibition event. Artists like Jamie Hewlett and Banksy, Mode 2, a few others. And I remember going in there for the first time and seeing, well, kind of discovering what a screen print edition was. I didn't know up until that point. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, that felt like the next kind of logical step. I was like, right, okay, let's get into that. That looks good. Let's do this. So obviously, Pictures on Walls are the people to, to speak to about this. So I found out where they were based in East London, and I started kind of strategically placing my street art around that area in the hope that they would see that. And they did, and it worked, which is great. And then off the back of that, we ended up having a conversation, and they produced my first screen print edition.
So my next thought, you may have just answered this, but I was thinking, you've been in the art world for a while now.
Hmm.
I was going to ask, is there something that you feel like you've done that you kind of created your own luck and set yourself maybe apart? And I do think you kind of just answered that in setting up that stall yourself and getting out into the right areas and
Yeah.
allow that luck to kind of find you and happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's 50-50. I mean, I'm kind of, and I've always said this, I think that I was lucky enough to be making art and living in London and living particularly in East London at a very specific time where street art was becoming a scene. It was becoming a thing. Whereas, prior to that, I mean, obviously, historically, Basquiat and people like that, in New York, the graffiti roots was huge. But in terms of London and the actual stepping aside from graffiti and something, the street art were wheat pastes and stencils and that kind of thing. I just found myself right in the middle at just the right time. So I think I'm very, very lucky in that respect. I think, anybody trying to start now, they have it's a much more difficult job on their hands. Or maybe it's not. I don't know. Maybe it's not with social media. I mean, obviously we didn't have social media back then, so there was no Instagram. We had like very kind of primitive forms of like street art forums, Stencil Revolution forum, which was a big one. So you would share photographs on there and have discussions with people all over the world about stencils, and and that was massive, massive thing then because it's all we had. But yeah, I think it was kind of part luck, but also part Yeah, just having a solid work ethic, just because of the way I've been raised,
Uh,
working class family.
It's similar to music, kind of the proliferation of Spotify and all that, where anyone can kind of record something and get
Mm,
it out there, and
yeah,
then have as powerful a distribution as maybe the traditional distribution was 20 years ago. And it's interesting where it kind of democratizes it, but it also that pool there's a lot more people swimming in that pool now.
yes, yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah. But like the beauty of stencils is you can cut one stencil and you can have one can of paint, and you can cover an awful lot of ground
Sure.
in one evening if you were that way inclined. And you can go from nobody knowing who you are to having your name out there and your artwork out there overnight, if that's your intention. If you're not kind of waiting for a gallery to come knocking on your door, you can meet people head on with your own work, sidestepping that gallery and the gatekeepers of that, the art institution. That's kind of what attracted me a lot. At the time, like it was never like playing a long game of, well, I'm going to become a full-time artist at some point, and that kind of happened as a byproduct of just doing something that I really enjoyed.
Well, how has the persistence and perseverance, that comes along with the work ethic, how has that been how has that impacted your career over the long term?
I quickly realized that making art for me was very beneficial in terms of my kind of helping my mental health. It was very therapeutic, and I've kind of historically had, slightly dodgy mental health from time to time. And this was a real savior for me. And a lot of kind of times in my life, it was it was a reason to get out of bed, get up, make the work. And it's kind of always been that way. And it's kind of been the driving forces behind what I do. It's a reason to get out of bed, get up, get in the studio, make something nice, and then share it with other people who will hopefully find it nice. But I mean, it's a lifelong journey now, and I think it's kind of like the more I've done, it's become more and more an a process of exploration and self-exploration, creative expression, and it very quickly just became something that I couldn't live without, really. And I just became very lucky that I managed to very quickly build up quite a decent sized collector base that allowed me to quit my kind of day job as a graphic designer and start doing this full time.
So how do you today structure your day to make art, to handle the business side of it, and
Mm.
just manage your own personal life as well? How are you structuring yourself to kind of always be propelling yourself forward?
Well, structure is like super important for me in a kind of slightly spectrum way. Like if my structure kind of gets shifted or is taken away from me in some way, I instantly feel really insecure, like the rug is pulled from underneath me. Like when we hit kind of like I have a 6-year old, when we have school holidays and all of a sudden my usual routine is taken away from me, I am just all over the place. I can't focus properly, and so for me, like a structure, I get into work. I drop my daughter off at school 9 o'clock. I'm in the studio at 9:30, 5 days a week. I work till 5:30, 5 days a week. It's just a solid 9 to 5. This, it's my job. I'm not this kind of, I don't know if it is a thing, but like you often think like the romantic idea that people have when you tell people you're an artist. Oh, that must be so much fun. That's so cool. You know what I mean? It's like, well, of course it is. It is fun, but it is, it is such hard work, and you have to be structured and you have to be disciplined. And again, with the ADHD, like I kind of have various challenges that kind of affect my structure, and I struggle with time management and things like that, which I'm constantly trying to find external tools to help with. But yeah, the structure is really important. But it's just this, working class work ethic of this is your job. You go to work, you do what you can to earn the money, to pay the mortgage and put food on the table.
You have to show up every day.
You have to show up whether, this inspiration doesn't exist. You know what I mean? You can't wait around. You go in every day and you work, you do something. You know what I mean? Like you have to show up. You have to be in the studio. You can't just be sitting around in cafes sketching people wandering by. I mean, it's a lovely romantic idea, but it's not. It doesn't work for me. Like it's go to work, shut the door behind me. I start the day off with a 10-minute meditation, which really helps. And then I put my music on, and then I'm pretty much flat out until I have to leave at 5:30. Yeah, I mean that's just the way it's always been, really.
I mean, I've found as a writer that there are certainly days where, I get the kids to bed and it's time to open up my computer and start working on, a scene or
Yeah,
whatever. And there are a lot of days where I feel like, this is just, that, quote unquote spark or inspiration isn't there. But when
yeah.
I may not have plucked that idea out of the universe or whatever,
Hmm.
had I not just sat down and done the work.
Absolutely, yeah. And you as a writer, particularly, it's that kind of thing, isn't it? And I think it applies to any creative process, which is the shitty first draft. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's like kind of forgetting about perfectionism, which is something I've really struggled with over the years, but just starting with something, that very rough block of clay, and allowing yourself the freedom to, the first pass of anything you're doing it will be shit. It'll be rough around the edges, but it's getting something down, and it's just having that discipline to turn up, put pen to paper or whatever it is that you're doing, get the shitty first draft out of the way, and then that's the ball rolling, and you've done the work for the day. Then you go in the next day, you take a look at what you did the day before, and then maybe you can chisel away and refine. And but I think a lot of people, me in particular, back in the day, coming in and just being kind of frozen with that fear of, well, it has to be perfect straight off the bat. And especially for someone like me, because I was kind of thrust into the art world, fairly quickly. Like the very first screenprint edition I did sold out, did really, really well. So my name as an artist went from not really many people knowing who I was to all of a sudden being collected by a lot of people. And I think there was this preconceived idea that I was an artist, I knew what I was doing, where actually it was my first ever screen print, which was based on one of the first ever stencils that I made. And so I was kind of learning, like flying by the seat of my pants. And every single day I was just like, fake it till you make it, making it up on the spot.
Yeah, you kind of had your first draft go public.
Well, yeah, well, this is it. Yeah, yeah. And so because of that, then it kind of really, affected me in a negative way, that it was, you have this idea that, well, everything has to be perfect. And it took me a long time to realize, well, just get in, do the work. That the perfection can come later if you need it to be, but just get the shitty first draft done.
But I do
And
think, in a positive note, you had the I'll say vision again, to see that door opening and step through it, and not just close it off and walk away.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know, it's tough. Like, I don't want to over dramatize and add like a level of mysticism about it, but it kind of, looking back now, it felt like my calling. I really do. Like, there was that world of street art and stencils in particular. They spoke to me in a way that nothing had done previously. It was, like I said, it was the right place at the right time. And when I started to teach myself this thing and start to paint, the joy that I was getting from that process was just kind of unparalleled. Like, I'd never, I'm not a sporty person. I don't understand sports. I didn't really, my hobbies at the time were, I love reading, I'm passionate about movies and watching movies. And this became very quickly just another hobby, another thing that I couldn't really live without. And it kind of snowballed from there. And then the more I got into it and the more I started to teach myself about art history and just the bigger vision of everything, 'cause obviously, like I said, I didn't go to art school, so I don't have that training. I just got sucked deeper and deeper into that rabbit hole and just fell deeper and deeper in love with the whole thing, with every kind of year that went by.
Awesome. Anything that you want to plug before we go?
Oh, let me think. Not really. I guess just my website, eelus.art, where you can buy my prints and you can see my work. There's kind of older work on there, new work. There's a few things with various galleries, but if you follow me on Instagram, that's the best place really to kind of keep on top of everything that I'm doing in and out of the studio, any gallery shows and that kind of thing. So eelus.art on Instagram, or eelus.art is my website. So yeah, take a look.
Awesome. Well, Lee, thank you for coming on with me today.
I appreciate it, Mike. Good to chat.
Thank you so much for listening today. Please subscribe to the Artist Work Ethic podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts, and please rate and review the show. Follow us on Instagram at The Artist's Work Ethic, and check out theartistsworkethic.com.